So welcome to the Internet of the Future, Preserving EU Values While Harnessing Digital Progress session. If you were expecting something else, you're probably in the wrong room, and now would be a good time to leave. What we're planning to do is we're planning to have first a short opening statement from the European Commission side. Then we will have a panel with some experts, and then at the end we'll have a sort of wrap up. Now, obviously, within the very tight time frame we have of 1 hour, we're not going to be able to fully discuss these issues. We're going to be able to raise some issues, and hopefully this will be a start of a dialogue where these issues can be fully discussed either on internet or in other forums and go from there. Okay, then let us make a start. And first I'd like to welcome to the stage Piers O'Donoghue, who's Director of Future Networks in DG Connect, the European Commission, who will give the opening statement. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Colin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. And very much in the context of what Colin referred to as a dialogue, I'm not going to speak for very long. I just wanted to set the scene from our perspective to get all more your feedback in the terms of this panel discussion from what we hope to do with you, the community, over the next months and years. It's because the internet is by now a key to everything. It's almost a platitude to say that. But we really need here in Europe to seize the economic and social opportunity that it represents while regaining leadership in some of the technologies and service areas where we have not been at the forefront over recent years. So we have to face up to that reality. We have to look at the technology challenges where we have all sorts of different technologies like edge computing, blockchain, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the list goes on, which are changing the game. They are leading to the emergence of a more distributed internet, which, if we were to play our cards right, might help to break down some of the siloed powerful players that exist at the moment, and to actually go towards not just one in which there is greater competition, but one that also responds something more closely to European values, a more human-centric, but also a more innovative internet for the people. So at the moment there are a lot of players, but only a few of them battling at global level for control. And we are therefore faced with a relatively existentialist question as to whether or not we want to actually push forward and through Horizon Europe and other measures to help European innovators and industry to regain leadership in some of these sectors. To do that, we've identified that a partnership is essential, but it's a partnership that has to be across different silos, across different traditional value chains, to take account of the way that internet and internet technologies are actually breaking down those value chains, breaking down silos between different economic spheres of activity. So we have thought of, in the context of our proposals for Horizon Europe, of a partnership bridging those major connectivity and service infrastructures to lead to a next generation internet. And now today we need your help to a certain extent in fleshing out those ideas, but to get the interest from experts and from you, the participants, so that we can actually measure what it is that we have to construct in terms of that partnership. We have an agenda that needs to involve the member states, because we know that there is significant deployment cost and infrastructure investment that is required to actually roll out a modern internet. And we have to work with all industry and stakeholders in order to do that. We have different financial instruments, but we of course need to know what it is that we want to do. What is the objective? Is it supported by industry and government before we actually get into the minutiae, the details of whether and how we deploy those financial instruments? And that's really where you come into it. We've already launched public consultation with regard to the strategic directions of Horizon Europe, including on the next generation internet. And I hope that you have all contributed, or that if you haven't, that you will do so very shortly. So today's session is all about getting your input as to how we shape the next generation initiative towards the goals of Horizon Europe, towards the economic and social development of Europe, and along the way looking at some of the processes, including how do we build a partnership of industries and services and technologists who perhaps haven't even got to the stage of calling themselves an industry yet, in order to build the sort of coalition that is required to put Europe's internet back on the map. So in that, I will leave aside the geopolitical interests. I've talked about big global players. Europe is somewhere in the middle between the United States and China, and that's a debate for another day. But what we have to assert is the economic and social interest in Europe and the economic need for Europe to actually take leadership. So that's where I want to stop so that I can hear the debate from our great panel. Thank you, Colin. Thank you very much for coming.
So, thank you, Piers. Then let me introduce the experts on our panel. Let's see how good I am at pronunciation. It's normally not very good, but I'll do my best. So, we start with Hanna Martinen-Diekens, who is Senior Director in Digitization Business Finland. Please join us. Next would be Jan Wester, who is the CTO from TNO and responsible for the 5G Amsterdam showcase at Euro 2020. So, the third member of our panel is Mirko Presser from the University of Aarhus, where he's an associate professor. So, next we have Eric Adwan from Orange, who's Director of Research and Innovation. So, we then have Anne-Johan Ferrer, who's head of NG Cloud, which I assume is Next Generation Cloud Lab at Atos. Sorry, there's so many acronyms sometimes. And last but no means least, we have Natalie Samarowicz, who's Vice President of IOTI. AIOTI. Sorry.
The name.
Yeah, we'll do it in a minute, forgive me. Okay, so let us get to the questions and the thoughts. So I'd like to start by asking Hannah why Europe really needs a publicly supported partnership in the areas of smart networks and services from your view.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I could reply in a very shortly, and that would be just to foster the development and faster intake of secure and trusted networks for the whole society. But I would like to maybe elaborate this a little bit more. So if we think about that the old World Wide Web is about 30 years old, and we have about 70% of the Europeans on the internet now. And there is a multitude of different digital solutions and services that can be then fostered towards these individuals and citizens from the businesses and the government perspective. But what is now going to happen with the next generation internet? If we're thinking about that, that's actually going to be the digital infrastructure, or like we call it back at home in Finland, our new critical infrastructure. And it's going to cut across the whole of society. And at the core of it, we will have 5G, future 6G, IoT, AI, and so forth and so forth. And these will together form our digital infrastructure, which is essential for the operation of our future European society. And that will then enable different new business verticals, industries, and also governmental services, citizen services to foster. And eventually, this will hopefully lead to a real European data economy and platform economy. So you ask why? Why should we have public players involved? It's really to foster this kind of digital transformation of this data-driven, trusted and open society. And I would say that is this cross-cutting nature of this critical infrastructure or the future internet that I'm talking about, then I don't think it can be left alone for the businesses and the academia to build on and to develop. And I think this is mainly because of the multitude of new technologies and the huge amount of positive, new, unforeseen services and solutions that it might entail for all of us. So what it really requires, it requires an immense ecosystemic collaboration where the public sector, the academia, the businesses, but also the citizens are all coming together to foster and plan together how we're going to define the environment where we want this type of Europe to flourish. And I would underline the words human-centric, data-driven, and trust-based European data economy. So the kind of the main considerations that there are for the public sector to think about and why the publicly supported partnerships in this context are relevant are multitude. I have picked up 8 or 9 sort of areas. I won't go into them into detail.
Good.
But I will just, I could talk for the rest of the day about them because I think they are fascinating.
She will be available afterwards for coffee,
Yes.
so...
But I would just like to kind of read them out. So one, of course, is on the policy side. Fostering policies that are enabling this kind of open data sharing economy. Then the other one is to look into the financial side, obviously, and that also from the risk sharing perspective. Then we have an ability and possibility also to foster open data initiatives, which I personally think are fascinating and are really one of the ways forward. Then is the innovative public procurement, creating new approaches to citizen-centric problems, as well as then fostering the ecosystemic approach that I mentioned about before. But I will stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I could raise the same question to Eric, and you can give from a sort of telecoms industry point of view why you think such a partnership makes sense.
Yes, first of all, I agree with many of the points that you made, and clearly the 10 years to come will be extremely important from our side, and I'm speaking in the name of Europe, for concretely rolling out 5G. Deployments have started now in several countries. Many others are about to start. And this is a huge stake for us. And as you said also, the role of the networks is already critical today. You coined the term critical infrastructure, and we fully agree with that. Networks, and beyond networks, cloud, that's why I will refer today more to digital infrastructure than networks, are becoming extremely important for various parts of our industry. And this will not stop. This will further increase in the future. And clearly, we need to have research in Europe which is influential in designing those future technologies. And there comes the interest of having some public funding to realize that, because public funding provides an incentive for various companies and academia players to come together and work together instead of working in their own field without exchanging with the others. And this is especially important when we want to have a global influence. And we talked a lot today about the European values, and having that kind of collaboration from the early stages of research allows us also to impulse those European values into the research, which is done also by other players, including players who have some labs in Europe, but which are not European companies. So this global influence is also a major stake if we want to have international standards, because in the end it's the cost of the equipment which are achieved by economies of scale. So the wider the market, the lower the price of the equipment. It's a simple math. This is extremely important, and it all starts with collaboration at the research level, and public funding helps to achieve this.
Thank you, sir. So the next question I planned to ask was, looking at the actual Smart Networks and Services partnership, what do people feel the focus should be, and who needs to be involved? So maybe I could start with Anna on this, and maybe you could give your view.
Sure. With regards to the focus of it, there has been here the 5G PPP that has been really successful, with a lot of innovations that have been brought. And I think that there is clearly a part on the continuation of that work that has to continue to bring this collaboration among the different stakeholders. So at the level of who will be participating, I think it's clear. It has to continue to be a mixture between academia and industry, in which we have this cross-fertilization environment and this collaboration environment that Eric was referring to, that enrich us all. the industry and the academia. On the way of organizing the programs and so on, from Atos' perspective, what we do in PPPs, because of the high industrial approach, is more in relation to kind of short-term research with 4 or 5 years implementation, and it is necessary because it has to have industry focus, and in industry it's really difficult to have longer term perspective. Also, there are critical topics or key topics that we had in the introduction, for example, as edge computing, that is bringing together artificial intelligence, cloud computing, networks, and IoT, and we are all having influences in the others. We have several research perspectives to the topic, but of course we have relations, and exploring these relations is going to enrich us all. So I think this aspect of convergence can help us all, but also we need to keep in mind of maintaining long-term research on the specific topics of IoT, of networks, of cloud computing, because there are aspects on the convergence, but there are aspects also that are linked to a specific research topic.
Thank you. Then maybe I could ask the same question to Nathalie, and you can give a slightly different view maybe. Please, go ahead.
Complementary view.
Okay.
That's for sure. I cannot agree more with the statements before, but I would like to bring an additional angle from the European Alliance of IoT Innovation standpoint. Without holding the attention for a long time, infrastructure and application innovation, I think, should be based on the process that we went through, should go hand in hand, and this synchronization and the joint focus on both angles of the enabling the internet of the future, I think should be at the core. So less silos yet, yes, but even adding more complexity of joining the infrastructure and the application innovations. So we went through the process. I would like to give a little bit of the insight. What was that? So this is inward focusing. So the road was already collaborative. AITI has presented its views on the Horizon Europe program back in 2018, already August. And following that, we, in collaboration with a number of industrial organizations and many stakeholders, so we came up with a list of critical innovation activities supporting a new European partnership in Horizon Europe. So this was already a process that yielded joint results and was very interesting. And out of that, just very quickly, because we don't have time to go over all of that, so looking at the outward need, the external need should be focused on the need to orchestrate the scarce resources that Europe has currently, and make sure that we're allowing and addressing the challenges that brought by the convergence of technologies. You mentioned some of those, but such as 5G, Internet of Things, industrial Internet, the edge computing, including artificial intelligence in the edge, and fusing those both technologies as well as the applications should be one of the focuses. Then we have to go beyond infrastructure deployment and look at the end-to-end applications, end-to-end application of the industrial IoT, which would bring socioeconomic development impact and financial justification for very costly infrastructure that we will have to face in order to get where we want to get, and what the mission goals are. Very briefly, we put together a vision document together with 5GIA partnership, which is laying down foundation for infrastructure and application innovation. And we believe it should go hand in hand to include common topics for research and innovation across the modalities and across the verticals. I won't go into the intelligent verticals, we all know them. Smart cities, mobility, smart water, smart energy, with the very ambitious goals for each of the domains. We have to go cross domains, and we have to work jointly on the infrastructure innovation application innovation, and addressing the technologies. I'll stop here.
Very good.
I can go on, though.
Well, we have a little bit of time. Let's see where we get to. I mean, perhaps members of the audience can sort of begin thinking what questions they would like to ask, because I hope we'll have time for some even more dynamic questions from the audience. But let me just, I've got a couple more sort of prepared questions, which I hope will be of interest. The next one is really trying to look at things from a European point of view. So clearly there's lots of talk of technology and technology super, and clearly technology is a key part of this partnership or this future digital work. But it needs to go beyond purely technology. And the next question is, how can we ensure that the European values are better represented and conserved in any future digital program? So maybe, Mirko, maybe you would be a good candidate for giving us some answers to this, sir.
Okay, so yes, thank you for this question. I think it's a very difficult question, because it's difficult to, first of all, agree on European values strictly and how this relates to digital technologies, and I think that can be a very long and difficult discourse. But I think we have some guiding documents, like the Charter of Fundamental Rights for European Union, and broadly speaking, this sort of addresses dignity, freedom, equality, solidarity, citizen rights, and justice. And of course, we've always had the discourse on data privacy, for instance. That's all over the media, and we talk about it a lot. But I think it filters also in many of the other topics that the Charter addresses, and eventually it will be in all of those topics that the digital sphere will have an influence, will dictate what freedom means, what equality means, and this is something that, of course, is very important to us as Europeans. We want to be in this, like Pierre said, in the middle ground between a very centralized way of thinking like China and a very market-oriented way of thinking like the US. And I think that if we just get our hands off this, if we just say we don't do an NGI, we don't do a next generation internet, we don't embed European values into this, we will have a version of the internet that's completely dominated by commercial vision. And it's completely dominated by the commercial vision because it's been so successful. So to be able to embed these European values, we actually need to come up with a number of alternatives that challenge this existing commercial vision, this existing commercial success even. So we're right at the pulse of having to deploy something. We can't go back to the labs and reviewing and researching things. We need to be out there with stakeholders and with the communities that are actually evolving the internet on a day-to-day basis. So we have one strong thing going at Europe already. We are establishing ourselves as like this regulatory superpower. So we've already put one interesting piece of legislation out there, which is the GDPR. It's buying us time. We have another piece in the making with this, which is identity. So AIDAS is an interesting sort of element into this. So we are not standing still. We are doing something. We are progressive about it. But I think we need to now get into this next step where we can create visions and spaces for creative and innovative thinking around the internet and technologies around the internet, and to challenge this commercial vision. I think when we look at the existing NGI program, so in Horizon 2020 we already have, I don't know what the numbers are in terms of money that has been spent now, but it's already significant. So I've been part of this, I've been so lucky to be part of the pathfinding effort into this, and now we're also part into funding through financial support to third parties, many new projects. So eventually this will be around about 200, 300, maybe even 400 teams. And what we can see is that 80% of those teams that are being funded there have never had anything to do with European funding. So we're getting a lot of new players that are important for this drive to sustaining European values within this initiative, participating from open source communities, from thinker communities, activists. So it's a very interesting new world to also enter into, not just dominated by big industry players or researchers, but also new communities joining in.
Thank you, sir. Then the last of the prepared questions is, how can the Horizon Europe and EU policies support lead applications to drive the realization of this NGI vision in Europe? And I'd first like to ask Jan to give his view, please, if you can find a microphone. Yes.
Well, maybe if you just allow me, I would maybe also add to what
Yes,
Mirko
please.
just said. Yeah. Well, maybe just a slight thing to add. What I think is very important is that the infrastructures have to serve and facilitate the exchange of data, and it's all about AI, it's all about big data, and it's all about data-driven business models. So if we want the ethical side also incorporated, we have to start thinking from trust. And why not also start from the public interest business cases that are to be there? And we want to create value. We want to create societal value. We want to create business value. Not only business value, but also societal value. So if you put those in front, and if you put those challenges in front, you could use these public interest cases to develop your schemes of trust. It's a trust framework that you could actually develop on which the private sector, in consequence, can develop their data sharing policies. And I think that's very important, because then you can also play a launching customer role. You can actually catalyst new models, etc. So that might be a first thing to add there. The other thing, the next question that you just raised, what I think, or maybe I should add to the previous thing I said, that we should think maybe also of creating. I mean, the internet has got big through internet exchanges, right? And this is just routing data. What we should think about is the data exchanges. The data exchanges that actually make sure that normative systems in which data is extracted, either from agriculture or logistics, every sector has its own normative system, right? And you want these normative systems to be exchangeable. So thinking of creating neutral data exchanges that actually make this possible. So it's not a data market, but it's actually the quality and the exchange of normative systems. That should be very interesting to work on that. And there are probably loads of initiatives all over Europe. In Amsterdam we started one that's called the Amsterdam Data Exchange. We grew big on the internet exchange, and now we think that actually being involved with data is a good thing, and we call it the Amsterdam Data Exchange. The other thing is actually that you have to get the primary processes of the sectors, of the verticals involved in this. What I saw, for instance, in the public-private initiative from 5G is that it's mainly vendor-driven, and it's mainly from the industry itself that develops new models. And there was a lack on, people coming in and businesses coming in from the verticals. And it's their primary processes that are actually changing. So this is the fundamental digital transformation that is taking place. And it's not something you can simply outsource. You cannot simply outsource connectivity. You cannot simply outsource data governance. Now you have to make it your own. It's your business, right? So if you see the digital transformation for the automotive sector, it's not about selling cars anymore. It's about the services for mobility. It's about the services for energy. So they're entering also different markets, right? And so they have to know how to deal with this. So they have to embrace these skills. They have to know how to involve this in their primary processes. Smart industry, Industry 4.0, same thing, right? It's not something that you can buy off the shelf from China or from America. You have to develop it yourself, right? So how do you do this? Because these are sectors that are not trained in these skills. They don't have these skills. They don't have this knowledge. They don't have these awareness. I think it's a good thing if you follow up on the initiative around digital innovation hubs. They're mainly structured now on themes or on technology. So it's Digital Innovation Hub for blockchain or Digital Innovation Hub for AI. Whereas these verticals, these businesses, they don't want 20 initiatives, 20 digital innovation hubs where they can get their knowledge. So you have to combine it into, in my opinion, into regional digital innovation hubs that actually orchestrate the access to facilities, to knowledge, and to field labs, etc. So people can actually discover and develop how to utilize these new skills and these new technologies. These regional digital innovation hubs, in my opinion, have to have an orchestration function. So they will not replace the other digital innovation hub. No, they may make use of the other digital innovation hubs, and they will actually orchestrate the access of these hubs in the regional innovation. Here also you can build upon the regional smart specialization policies, because every region has a strength in an economy, so they can actually make a front effort there and exchange with similar regions. So you can scale up all over Europe again. So this is what I call, we might create a sort of European network of centers for digital transformation. That's the name any other name is equally fine. And we are actually trying to set something up on a national scale in Holland right now. So it might be just an idea how you can actually make it tangible, concrete, and also build on previous policy work and just move it forward to creating value in the digital transformations which are very fundamental and which affect all vertical sectors, etc. And the digital infrastructure has to look at that and develop on those values, because they need to earn money as well. Right?
Thank you, sir. Natalie, I believe, did you want to? Yeah, sure.
That was a lot of topics to think about, and sort of links into our position on a lot of them as well. You touched upon even some of the nodes. I think the key word is the ecosystems and the nodal value chains, including citizen centricity from the very beginning and involvement from the very beginning. I think we still have a way to go how to achieve it and what could be done. Now, this is on the bottom-up level. If we look at the top-down, there are big societal challenges that we're dealing with or will have to deal with for the next 10 years. Energy transition, one of them. Climate change adaptation is the next one. Reaching climate neutrality. Improving the conditions in the cities and making them more livable. So greater alignment towards achieving those goals where the value chains and the nodes are very well orchestrated and where we maximize and optimize the scarce resources is one of the ways to go. At AOTI, we advocate system-of-system approach, which creates greater value for all. And for example, one of the examples is how to orchestrate vertical application domains and cross-vertical application domains leverage, both on the architecture as well as on the applications level. Networks that we need to be linking multiple applications and in secure and interoperable ways. So we go cross on the infrastructure level. And the applications of common legal frameworks that determine liability across multiple domains. Maybe that's one of the topics that we didn't touch upon yet. It's not the most innovative one, but yet in order to have intra-regional and as well as pan-European solutions that can achieve the competitiveness for European industry and the society, then we need to orchestrate it across all of these nodes. So then another topic just worth probably mentioning is speed of adaptation. We cannot take another 20 years to adapt and to adjust, as well as to get it into the societal acceptance. So the speed of adoption of what we're building, thinking, and innovating on is very important. Learning and the acceptance is of essence, and how to achieve it, I think we have to pay attention to. And all of this would provide the backdrop for economies of scale. Without that, we cannot move forward. I think a lot been said already on the enabling technologies, IoT, 5G, edge computing, AI, but without the speed of adoption, learning, and the acceptance, we're not going to get far. So the global race for leadership without the acceptance is also not a reachable goal. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there were some other comments. Please go ahead, Hannah.
Hi, thank you. I had a couple of comments. Maybe I just quickly continue what Natalie said on the take-up rate and the ecosystemic approach there. I think one of the important issues that we should all be doing already now is to look at, for example, what are the actual user cases around 5G, and fostering with the means and ways we have in our different areas the research and development activities on that, but real concrete user case type of scenarios. And because that's really something that can help us in speeding up the full data-driven digitalization of European society. And I think here different players within European Union, we have a lot to co-work and co-share, because in different regions have possibly kind of different competence areas. And if we could somehow link, be through the DIS that you mentioned about, or some lighter forms of collaboration, if we could somehow faster link these ecosystems, because the take-up rate on new services and solutions based on these technologies is much, much faster when you share. Then I would like to have another comment which is related to the trust. I think there's a couple of layers on this trust, and one has to do with an individual and maybe also some corporations' trust in the system and in the technologies. And in order to combat that, of course, we need to look into the cybersecurity and the different technological building blocks that we can put into the systems, not just on the software, but also on the systemic layer, all the way down to the kind of bottom line infrastructure, so the whole value chain. But then there's this other area which has to do with training or elaborating with individuals, with the citizens, that what do these different technologies mean. For example, you take AI. AI can very much be regarded as something that's hostile to the typical traditional working environment. So if we would rather engage our citizens in understanding how they can benefit from the utilization of AI, that would enable then the take-up rate of AI-driven technologies, for example, services and solutions. And then, of course, the other area on that is to look at how we could, and this is a bit more serious discussion, how we could really look into this trust factor. It's not anymore an individual or business or platform. It's also becoming more and more a state type of issue on the trust. And I think there again, European Union can do a lot together.
Yes, indeed. Eric, you wanted to say something, sir?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to react to what you just said about the need to find real use cases for verticals. And I think there has been a lot of work in various industry and other fora to work on that, in particular in 5G PPP. And now the thing is that we need to encourage acceptance is one thing, but adoption is even better, because now that we have developed the technology, which is not yet deployed because we have many enablers for verticals that will come in rather 2022 or 2023 with 5G core network and the slicing and so on, and ultra reliability and low latency. But we need now to experiment with verticals to demonstrate the benefits of the technology, and the technology actually responds to those industries' needs. And phase 3 of 5GPP is actually doing that by enabling projects with test beds to allow different verticals to come and test 5G enablers to their technology. So I think that's the beginning of the path. This is good, but it needs to be further strengthened in the future. And any initiative coming from EU policy will be much welcome to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Something I wanted to add, that something else that I think in this piloting environment that we see, also with artificial intelligence, and so we will say that we will have pilots and that are, you know, in areas in which legislation is quite significant, and in order for us, the scientists, the technologies, to advance, the European Commission maybe could think in the future about some mechanisms that we could have with that legal coverage for piloting and testing of certain technologies, because otherwise it is very difficult to have real deployments, as you are saying, with the piloting, and that helps us to advance the technology.
Just to build on that, so we're looking at the regulatory sandboxes, which are interesting format, but also, as we see, there is multimodality on the regulatory sandboxes across Europe, but the solutions or the applications that we would like to build on top of the infrastructure are of pan-European relevance and the cross-domain relevance. So this is something that we need to address, how to take the sandbox on the country level and have a mechanism that it could be adapted in other member states or in the regions, whatever we take as the unit. That's one suggestion. And the other one is relevance of the large-scale pilots. The experimental tests on the specific facets of the technology on the smaller scale is great, it's effective, solving specific topics, but when we're looking now at the whole continuum from the intelligent edge, from the highly distributed systems to the smart networks, to the IoT, industrial IoT, and all the way to the AI and those systems, we need the whole community in order to tackle the challenges, look at it from the holistic standpoint, and not to deal with the problems afterwards, but along the way. We just don't have time. If we take the societal challenges into the consideration, the ones that I mentioned before, at least those three, there are many more, of course, then we need to do it from the get-go. In orchestrated way, synchronized way. So large-scale piloting is one of the mechanisms, but I'm sure we can do better. We're doing it for mobility right now, for example. Yes, lots of use cases related to mobility and 5G, but it should go beyond.
Okay.
So, well, this is some input from the IIC, so the Industrial Internet Consortium. So I've had some conversations with Richard Soley, who's one of the, I don't know, evangelists, I think we would call him.
Religious person.
Religious people, yes. And so the IIC is the Industrial Internet Consortium, and they measured their success on the number of test beds that their partners did in collaboration. And I thought that was a really good metric. But it turns out in the last year and a half or something like this, their rhetoric has completely changed. They said, we're tired of test beds. You know, we can show interoperability, but what we really need to show is how you divide the cake. You know, how in a value constellation you can actually share out who's getting which part. And the problem is you're moving there from a pre-commercial context into a commercial context. So how is that solved in this environment? That's really difficult. And I think just one more response to your National Center of Innovation. I think it's, we cannot see technology in isolation anymore. My field, I would say, is IoT, and I do as much machine learning as the guy that says he does machine learning, and he does as much IoT as I do. So, it depends which sort of flavor you are. You just talk about that more, but you mean many other technologies. So I also mean communication technology with that. 5G is important. So there's no more isolation of technology anymore. It's all combined. NGI is a very good tool for it because it's kind of a little bit agnostic to all of those technologies and bundles it nicely together. And I think these centers, they can't just focus on one element in technology anymore. They need to combine it. And you need to even branch out because if you work with data, you automatically have to know about the law. So it's not about technology only.
Well, I think this is the main point that I always make in these kind of discussions. That it's not about the technology, but you do need a more mature view also on economics and on economic theories that are based on the data-driven business models, and it's rapidly changing. So we're going towards this platform economy. So all the market structures are rapidly changing. So is Mercedes today maybe an automotive company, but is it tomorrow an automotive company or a data company? I'm not sure. So which part of the regulation will do they have to follow, right? So this is what we have to do in these centers. Figure this out. What kind of an IoT marketplace? You could have a smart light post, but I mean, it's actually a small IoT marketplace. And what kind of marketplace are we actually talking about? So, what kind of regulation do you do on these kind of things? So, these economic perspectives, less, I think, neoclassical stovepipe-driven things, but more from complexity economics, more like, okay, people are moving, actors are moving towards the most beneficial places in these networks, in these ecosystems, in these platforms. So are you an energy company? Are you a logistics company? Are you tomorrow? Probably not. So this is actually what we have to discover together. And here the values that we would like to add to these developments are crucial. And I think that the main question is, how can I make sure that the public interest that is the same yesterday as it is today, as it will be tomorrow, can be secured also in these new models. And that is what you should develop also in these centers, as I imagine, right?
Okay, I think we should at least have one question from the audience because panels sort of traditional. No, I appreciate the interaction. That was good. So, sir, speak up. Can you have a mic? No, only the people on the podium are allowed a mic. I'm sorry. No. If you haven't got an orange, go for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interesting thoughts. A little bit of history. So from between 2011 and 2017, the EU supported the FIWARE initiative. I don't know if you know that. In which was about 300 million of public funding was invested in technology to build an alternative to US-based infrastructure, but pretty much without any lasting results. It's a lot of money. Then there was the Digital Social Innovation strand, and also the Next Generation Internet initiative that actually promoted decentralized solutions, inclusion, empowerment, agency and sustainability, collective intelligence, and also the distributed ownership of infrastructure. This has led to dozens of smaller projects, with civic society included, that had a severe impact on society, on policy, and eventually on economics. This has led me to contemplate how to strengthen civic society and human values at the start of this new research program. And that leads me to 3 questions. So first, how do we prevent the mistakes of FIWARE, so massive funding pretty much without any results? Yeah. Can and should we require civic actors and the humanities that were not so much mentioned to be an integral part of new innovation programs? I think we should. And the third is based on the SDGs success. can we develop an EU framework for responsible IT and responsible internet to inform this new policy?
Well, that was easy. So if you could give a one-word answer. No, please go ahead.
To fireware, because I work for Atos. Atos is one of the companies that it is continuing fireware as part of the Fireware Foundation, and I think personally some of your statements are a bit strong, because a lot of use cases and products, both from Atos, from Telefonica, public deployments in the smart cities are happening, and they are deploying and working today. So of course, it was a lot of investment, but I again think that it has had a value, and it has a value today.
And we're continuing with the projects not related, but in IoT API and large-scale pilots, where those platforms that are being developed are reusing and interfacing fireware components. So one thing is to suggest something big, but you also have to take value from all the components and the ecosystems that it created. So I also think the statement is skewed.
So there are some big differences between what was done in FIware and what is being done in the future, for instance, in the NGI. So one of the big differences is that FIware presented a platform, and you needed to follow this platform, whereas the NGI is much more grassroots and focused on the philosophy. Now, both sides, I think, have issues. So when you talk about, only grassroots, then how do you catch that? Is the market responsible for this? Who's the client? I think we talked a little bit about procurement earlier on. We're looking at new mechanisms there, but in essence, we need to ask ourselves, who is the client of what we're doing? And I would like to see Europe to be more of the client, actually, in the future. But in the innovation activities, that will happen. So, and I wouldn't say there are failures. I think, FIware has brought, there was at one point or another, there were 1,000 people going to work every day towards a vision. Now, if this was fulfilled or if there are edgy parts to it, we can argue about it. But it expanded the community of people thinking about a European community of people developing technology. And I think that's a value that in itself is very important.
I would like to maybe comment a little bit on your first question. And I think pretty much what I can see is already happening, but just to sort of reinforce that, is that the development and research and development and innovation activities should very much compile the research academia, but also individual citizens into this discussion, and to sort of foster also a very agile type of activities, where it's okay to fail and then start all over again, or to fail and then continue from slightly a sidetrack. So, and in sort of do this kind of piloting on the real life as we go forward by combining the different new technological components that we have at our disposal.
Yeah. No.
So I think there are many different initiatives that are ongoing on the European level with the Commission. And there's some fascinating things that we are trying out, that we are trying to bring into the discourse. So for instance, science, technology, and the arts is a program that's phenomenally interesting. I mean, it's small in itself now and trying to make an impact. But there's always something else that we are trying out and working with it. And some get bigger and some don't.
Okay, I'm afraid, I think looking at the time, we need to draw to a close there. So if I could ask everyone to thank the wonderful panel for their... And if I could ask Piers perhaps to give the closing conclusions and thoughts, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I apologise to the panel for turning my back to you, because I shouldn't. You've done a great job. Putting this in another part of the context is many of you will have heard or seen President-elect von der Leyen's speeches, first of all to the European Parliament, and then when she presented the new Commission and her political priorities. And she has very much put digital transformation in a very prominent position, one of 6 key priorities. And faced with that challenge as a bureaucrat, that's my job and that's our job too, to implement that. But in reality, of course, you see that it is a fundamental challenge to really work on this digital transformation. And what I'm encouraged from this panel discussion is that we have groups of people who've been working in different tracks, but all of them are calling for the need for this interdisciplinary approach, the need to work together, particularly in terms of ecosystems, which is a word that I heard several times. And that's something which we take away. It's something which we take very seriously, and we want to develop with the NGI program. So I too would have a strong reaction to the gentleman who made critical comments about fireware, but of course that criticism is welcome, because we then always have to look again at how we do things and how we do things better. We do have some very strong progress coming out of fireware, but what was the answer given to you, not by me, but by the panel, I think is very good, is that certainly we now are focused much more on a bottom-up approach from communities, some of whom have no exposure previously to our research programs or to the European Union, and by the way, hate coming to meetings in Brussels because they have better things to do. They will actually be given the place to be able to feed in, but direct more of the work that we do on the next generation internet. So Mirko particularly presented our vision and the work that he and teams like him are doing with regard to these principles, these fundamental principles that guide a European internet. And we have to somehow allay that with the work that's going on and which is essential for the plumbing. It's not sexy, but the technologies and the deployment of the new networks, the 5G and beyond 5G networks, which cost money as well as research, in order to ensure that we can run that internet, and we can do so independently in Europe if that's what's required. The plumbing has to be here, and it's better if it's something which is open, transparent, and allows us to have systems which are respectful of the GDPR, of personal security, but also give a great place to the possibility of local communities or interest communities to come together in ecosystems and to develop value for society, for the economy. So that's something which is very important. So I heard a lot, and I'm listening carefully to what was said about trust. And then, of course, the importance of digital innovation hubs, because there is always going to be a centralizing tendency. And quite frankly, the 5G infrastructure and the next generation internet built on top of that has to be across all, I'm going to say 28 member states, we are still in September, across the entire European Union, to allow all parts of society and the economy and culture to benefit from the technological advance, because they have an awful lot to give as well. And we will fight against those centralizing tendencies again by decentralizing. The technology allows us to do that in order to have people who otherwise were disconnected from the Brussels bubble. And lastly, I think what I need to say is I do hear that there is a strong support for the partnership. We have a lot of work to do yet to make sure that it is actually fit for purpose, that it will deliver on the next generation internet. And we rely on our speakers coming from their different communities, but also on you, on the wider research and innovation community. So if you haven't already done so, I hope that you will be responding to our consultations, to the questionnaires, to ensure that we get your view, including the criticism. What we didn't do so well the last time, what do we need to do better the next time? That's an essential learning, and we have to expose ourselves to that. I would say that the element of economies of scale, of building ecosystems, is something which is very challenging, not just to the Commission, but actually to those who are well organized and functioning professionally now with sort of tomorrow's objectives in mind. I was in a session just next door an hour ago. We were talking about future disruptive technologies. We have to be aware of what is next in order, in some cases, to ensure that Europe sees that coming, and that we have the technology and the technologies in place to jump on board quickly so that Europe regains some of its leadership in the next generation internet because of the central role that it will play for the development of economy and society. I could go on, but I would like to say thank you to Colin and thank you to the panel. the discussion doesn't stop here. So please, as I said, do keep your interest, keep your involvement, and do contribute to the public consultations on the strategic programming for Horizon Europe, and particularly for Next Generation Internet. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to the panel.
And with that, the session is closed. So go and try and find some coffee or something interesting. Thanks for your attention.